There are objects that shouldn't exist. Stone cut with a precision no ancient tool should allow. Holes drilled straight through granite. Perfectly smooth. Perfectly round. Vases so thin you can see light through the walls. Carved from rock that can shatter a chisel. A dagger pulled from a pharaoh's tomb. Made from metal that fell from the sky. These aren't legends. Not myths passed down by firelight. They're real. Sitting in museums right now. Measured. Scanned. Studied by scientists who still can't agree on how they were made. Tonight, we're going deep into Egypt's strangest unsolved objects. The ones that don't fit the story we've been told. Some were pulled from sealed tombs. Broken. Abandoned. Left behind by someone. But who? If that question pulls at the underground water chamber that Egypt still cannot fully explain. For thousands of years, pilgrims crossed the deserts of Upper Egypt, believing that somewhere beneath the sacred sands of Abydos lay the gateway to the realm of Osiris, the god who ruled over death, rebirth, and the promise of eternal life. It was a place unlike any other, a city of temples, of rituals, of memory. Then, hidden beneath one of Egypt's greatest monuments, archaeologists uncovered something nobody expected. Not a royal tomb, not a buried temple, but an enormous stone chamber, flooded with water, silent, waiting. Today it is known as the Osirion, one of Egypt's most mysterious monuments, and one that still refuses to explain itself. The discovery began at the start of the 20th century, when British archaeologists cleared centuries of drifting sand from around the magnificent temple of Seti I at Abydos, one of the finest temples ever built by the ancient Egyptians. Their work seemed routine, stone by stone, wall by wall. The temple slowly emerged from the desert once again. Then the excavation reached something deeper, far below the temple floor. Massive granite pillars, enormous stone blocks, passageways descending into darkness. The deeper they excavated, the stranger the structure became. It felt completely different, almost separate, almost forgotten. The temple of Seti I is elegant. Its walls are covered with beautifully carved hieroglyphs. Every column tells a story. Every surface was designed to impress. The Osirion is the opposite. Its walls are plain. Its design is simple. Its enormous granite blocks seem almost oversized for the space around them. No elaborate decoration, no brightly painted reliefs, only stone, heavy stone, stone that has waited for thousands of years. Archaeologists eventually named the monument the Osirion because of its close association with Osiris, whose cult had been centered at Abydos for much of Egyptian history. The name seemed appropriate. Ancient Egyptians believed Abydos was one of the holiest places in their world. Many even believed the head of Osiris rested somewhere beneath the city. Every year, pilgrims arrived to honor him. Priests performed ceremonies celebrating his death and resurrection. Life, death, renewal. Everything seemed to lead back to Abydos. The Osirion appeared to belong to that sacred landscape. Yet questions appeared almost immediately. Although the monument stands directly behind Seti's temple, many Egyptologists noticed that its construction looks remarkably different from the buildings surrounding it. The contrast is difficult to ignore. The temple above is refined. The chamber below feels ancient. Its granite blocks resemble those used in some of Egypt's earliest monumental structures. Each stone weighs many tons. Each was carefully fitted into place with astonishing precision. The entire structure seems designed to last forever. Perhaps that was always the intention. One mystery continues to puzzle researchers more than any other: the water. Even today, groundwater fills much of the chamber throughout the year, surrounding the central platform with perfectly still pools that reflect the towering pillars above. Visitors often describe the atmosphere as strangely peaceful, almost unreal. The light barely reaches the floor. The water hardly moves. Only silence. Some researchers believe this was intentional. Ancient Egyptian creation stories describe the world emerging from a vast, endless ocean known as Nun. According to this theory, the Osirion represented those sacred waters, a symbolic place of creation, a place where life began before the first sunrise. It is an idea that fits remarkably well with Egyptian religion, but it remains only one possibility. Others disagree. They believe the chamber was originally dry, and that the water appeared much later as the local groundwater gradually rose over thousands of years. If that is true, the flooded appearance visitors see today may never have existed in ancient times. The evidence remains uncertain. The water offers no answers. The age of the monument has also become part of the debate. Most Egyptologists believe the Osirion was built during the reign of Seti I in the 13th century BC as part of his temple complex. Its unusual appearance, they argue, reflects a deliberate architectural choice rather than a different period of construction. Others remain less certain. They point to the weathering of the stone, the enormous granite blocks, the distinctive engineering. Some suggest that parts of the monument could preserve an older sacred structure incorporated into Seti's temple. Not an entirely different civilization, simply an older chapter of Egyptian history. A chapter later rulers chose to preserve rather than replace. No one has been able to prove either interpretation completely. Excavations have uncovered relatively few inscriptions explaining the chamber itself. That absence is unusual. Egyptian builders often recorded the purpose of their monuments with remarkable detail. Here, those explanations are largely missing. The stones remain. The words do not. Perhaps they were never carved. Perhaps they have been lost. Or perhaps the builders expected everyone to understand the monument without explanation. History has forgotten what they remembered. The granite vat of Zawyet El Aryan. For more than a century, one unfinished pyramid has quietly guarded one of Egypt's strangest discoveries, hidden beneath the desert where few visitors ever venture, and even fewer archaeologists have been allowed to study. No golden treasure, no royal mummy, no decorated burial chamber, just a single object, carved from granite, perfectly smooth, enormous, and unlike almost anything else found in ancient Egypt, it sits alone beneath the unfinished pyramid of Zawyet El Aryan, waiting, silent, still refusing to explain itself. The story begins just south of Giza, where an unfinished pyramid rises only slightly above the desert floor. Most tourists never see it. For decades, the area remained inside a restricted military zone. Access was limited, research slowed. The monument gradually faded from public attention. Yet beneath the unfinished pyramid lies one of Egypt's greatest archaeological puzzles. In the early 20th century, archaeologists excavated a deep shaft leading far below the surface. The descent was steep. The air grew cooler. Then the shaft opened into a large underground chamber cut directly into the bedrock. At its centre stood an enormous granite object unlike anything the excavators expected. Not a coffin, not a sarcophagus, something else entirely. The object is usually described as a granite vat, a massive oval basin carved from a single block of hard pink granite. Its interior is astonishingly smooth. Its walls are carefully shaped. Its craftsmanship is unmistakable. Granite is one of the hardest stones the ancient Egyptians ever worked with. Shaping it required extraordinary patience. Polishing it required even more. The finished object weighs many tons, yet somehow it was lowered into an underground chamber before the surrounding structure was completed. That alone presents an extraordinary engineering challenge. The chamber itself adds another layer to the mystery. Unlike many royal burial chambers, its walls contain very little decoration. There are no colourful paintings, very few inscriptions, almost nothing explaining why the chamber was built. The granite vat dominates the room. Everything else feels secondary. It is almost as though the entire chamber was designed around this single object. That impression has puzzled researchers ever since. Most Egyptologists believe the monument dates to Egypt's third dynasty, more than 4,500 years ago. The unfinished pyramid is often connected with a ruler known as Kaaba, although no definitive inscription confirms that identification. Even the pyramid's owner remains uncertain. That uncertainty extends to the chamber below. Without clear written evidence, archaeologists must rely on architecture, construction techniques, and careful comparison with other monuments. The answers remain incomplete. Then comes the question everyone asks. What was the granite vat actually used for? Some researchers believe it functioned as a royal sarcophagus, an unusual one. Its oval shape differs from most Egyptian coffins, but variations did exist during Egypt's earliest dynasties. Perhaps this represented an experimental design. Perhaps it belonged to a tradition that never became common. Others remain unconvinced. The interior seems unusually deep, the shape unusually rounded. It lacks several features expected in a conventional sarcophagus. The debate continues. Another theory suggests the basin played a ceremonial role. Perhaps it held water during important religious rituals. Water carried enormous symbolic meaning in ancient Egypt. It represented creation, purification, renewal. A sacred vessel placed beneath a pyramid could have carried powerful spiritual significance, yet direct evidence is missing. No surviving texts describe such a practice inside this monument. The stone remains silent. A few researchers have proposed that the chamber itself was never completed. Construction may have stopped unexpectedly. Perhaps the king died. Perhaps political priorities changed. Perhaps the pyramid project was abandoned before the chamber received its final purpose. If that happened, the granite vat may have been installed long before anyone decided exactly how it would be used. It is an intriguing possibility, one among several. No one knows for certain. The engineering remains equally impressive. The granite basin had to be carved with extraordinary precision, then transported across the desert, then lowered through a narrow shaft into the underground chamber. Every stage required careful planning. Every mistake could have been disastrous. Serapeum, Saqqara granite boxes. For centuries, the sands of Saqqara concealed a place unlike almost anywhere else in ancient Egypt. A hidden underground complex where silence hangs in the air, and enormous granite boxes sit exactly where they were left thousands of years ago. No painted walls, no glittering treasures, no royal throne, only long tunnels, dark chambers, and stone. Lots of stone. Each box is carved from solid granite. Each weighs many dozens of tons, and each continues to raise the same quiet question. Why were they built this way? The place is known as the Serapeum of Saqqara, one of Egypt's most extraordinary archaeological discoveries, and one of its most carefully studied mysteries. The modern story began in the middle of the 19th century when French archaeologist Auguste Mariette noticed the weathered remains of a stone sphinx emerging from the desert near Saqqara. It seemed insignificant at first, just another buried monument, but the sphinx was not standing alone. More appeared, then another. Each one seemed to point in the same direction. Mariette followed the ancient avenue beneath the drifting sand. Eventually it led him to the entrance of a vast underground complex. The tunnel stretched deep beneath the desert. Long corridors disappeared into darkness. Side chambers opened one after another. Then came the discovery that astonished everyone. Inside each chamber rested an enormous granite box, perfectly still, perfectly silent. The scale of the boxes is difficult to appreciate until standing beside one. Each was carved from a single block of granite. Many weigh more than 70 tons. Their lids alone weigh several additional tons. The surfaces are remarkably smooth, the corners carefully finished, the interiors polished with extraordinary precision. Ancient Egyptian craftsmen were already masters of working stone. The Serapeum shows just how skilled they had become. Patient workmanship, remarkable precision, an extraordinary achievement. Historians now believe the tunnels were created over many centuries. The earliest sections may date to the reign of Amenhotep III during the New Kingdom. Later pharaohs expanded the complex. New chambers were cut into the bedrock. Additional granite boxes were installed. Generation after generation added to the sacred underground cemetery. The site continued growing for hundreds of years, quietly, almost hidden beneath the desert. The purpose of the Serapeum is generally understood. The granite boxes held the remains of the Apis bulls, sacred animals believed to represent the living manifestation of the creator god Ptah, and later closely associated with Osiris after death. When an Apis bull died, it was treated with extraordinary honour. Priests organised elaborate ceremonies. The animal was carefully mummified, then carried to the Serapeum for burial. It was one of the highest religious ceremonies in ancient Egypt. Yet even this explanation leaves important questions behind. The first mystery is the granite itself. Most Egyptian sarcophagi were impressive. These are something else entirely. The boxes are enormous, their walls unusually thick, their lids astonishingly heavy. Moving them from distant granite quarries to underground chambers beneath Saqqara would have required remarkable planning and organisation. Researchers continue studying exactly how the builders accomplished such a task. Ramps, wooden sledges, large teams of workers, perhaps all of them together. The evidence points toward careful engineering rather than a single forgotten technique. Still, the logistics remain impressive. Another question concerns the precision. Many visitors notice how flat the surfaces appear. The edges align with remarkable accuracy. The interiors are equally smooth. Some believe this simply reflects the highest level of Egyptian craftsmanship. Others argue the builders devoted unusual attention to these particular monuments because of the sacred importance of the Apis bulls. Saqqara Schist Disk. In the vast desert of Saqqara, where countless tombs have rested beneath the sand for thousands of years, archaeologists uncovered a small stone object that seemed strangely out of place among the statues, pottery, and burial treasures surrounding it. It wasn't made of gold, it carried no hieroglyphs, it wasn't even particularly large. Yet more than a century later, it remains one of ancient Egypt's most debated artifacts. Not because of what it is, but because no one can say with complete confidence what it was made for. A carved stone disc, 3 graceful curved blades, a hollow centre, an object unlike almost anything else discovered in ancient Egypt. Today it is simply known as the Saqqara Schist Disk, and it continues to keep its purpose hidden. The story began in 1936 during excavations inside the tomb of Prince Sabu, a high-ranking official who lived during Egypt's first dynasty, more than 5,000 years ago. The tomb itself was remarkable. Large underground chambers, stone vessels, copper tools, fragments of everyday life carefully placed beside the dead. The kinds of discoveries archaeologists often expect inside an early royal burial. Then one object changed everything. Resting among the grave goods was a finely carved disc made from schist, a soft, fragile stone that can break surprisingly easily. At first glance, it looked delicate, almost too delicate, especially considering its unusual shape. The disc measures just over 60 centimetres across. Its outer edge forms a nearly perfect circle. The centre contains a carefully carved cylindrical opening. Between them stretch 3 thin curved blades, each evenly spaced, each remarkably symmetrical. The entire object was carved from a single piece of stone. No joints, no separate parts. Just one continuous sculpture. Elegant, balanced, unusual. Schist is not an easy material for such a design. Although softer than granite, it can fracture unexpectedly while being carved. Creating 3 thin, curved sections without breaking the stone would have required extraordinary patience and skill. Ancient Egyptian craftsmen clearly understood their material. Every curve appears intentional, every surface carefully finished. Even after thousands of years, the workmanship remains impressive. The tomb where it was found helps establish its age. Prince Sabu lived during the First Dynasty, a time when Egypt was still forming as a unified kingdom. The pyramids had not yet been built. Most royal monuments remained relatively simple. Writing itself was still developing. Many technologies were in their earlier stages. That makes the disc even more intriguing. It seems surprisingly sophisticated for its time, not impossible, simply unexpected. Then comes the question that has followed the artifact ever since. What was it actually used for? Despite decades of research, no explanation has gained universal acceptance. Some Egyptologists believe the disc may have served as part of a ceremonial vessel, perhaps another object now lost, once fitted into its centre. Wood, metal, leather, materials that rarely survive 5,000 years beneath the desert. If those missing pieces disappeared long ago, the stone disc we see today may represent only part of a much larger object. It is a reasonable possibility, but impossible to prove. Others believe it may have been symbolic rather than practical. Ancient Egyptians often created objects intended for ritual use rather than everyday life. The disc's unusual form may have carried religious meaning understood by those who placed it inside the tomb. If so, that meaning has vanished with time. The object remains. The explanation does not. A few researchers have suggested it could have been a stand or support for another ceremonial item. Its balanced design would certainly allow it to hold something placed above it. Yet no matching object has ever been discovered. No inscription describes its purpose. No similar example has been found intact. The disk stands alone, literally and historically. Perhaps the greatest mystery is its uniqueness. Egypt has produced hundreds of thousands of artifacts, stone bowls, statues, tools, jewellery, furniture, yet nothing quite matches the schist disk. Its shape has no obvious parallel, no complete series, no workshop filled with unfinished examples. It appears almost without warning, then disappears from the archaeological record. That absence has fascinated scholars for generations. Modern technology has allowed researchers to study the disk in extraordinary detail. High-resolution scans, three-dimensional models, microscopic analysis of its surface. Every examination confirms the remarkable quality of its craftsmanship, yet none has revealed its true purpose. The measurements are precise, the symmetry intentional, the design unmistakably deliberate. Still, the disk refuses to explain itself. Visitors who see the artifact today often pause longer than expected. Its appearance feels strangely familiar, almost modern, not because it belongs outside ancient Egypt, but because good design often feels timeless. Simple lines, balanced proportions, careful craftsmanship, qualities appreciated in every age. Perhaps that is why the disk continues to inspire so much curiosity, not because it proves extraordinary claims, but because it quietly reminds us how many ordinary questions from the ancient world still remain unanswered. The Saqqara Schist Disk has survived kingdoms, invasions, and the passing of 5,000 years. It has outlived the prince buried beside it, outlived the civilization that created it, outlived even the memory of its original purpose. Only the stone remains. Tutankhamun iron dagger meteorite. When Howard Carter first stepped into the tomb of Tutankhamun in 1922, he entered a world that had remained untouched for more than 3,000 years, where every object seemed to preserve a moment from the final days of one of Egypt's most famous pharaohs. Golden shrines, jewelled furniture, ceremonial chariots, hundreds of remarkable treasures. Yet among all the gold, one small weapon would eventually become one of the tomb's greatest scientific mysteries, not because of its beauty, but because of where it came from. A simple iron dagger, forged from a metal that may have fallen from the sky. The dagger rested beside the young king's mummy, carefully placed within the wrappings that had protected him for more than 3 millennia. Its golden handle shimmered beneath Carter's lamp. Its finely polished blade looked almost untouched by time. Even after thousands of years inside the sealed burial chamber, the weapon showed remarkably little rust. That alone surprised archaeologists. Iron rarely survives so well, especially after such an extraordinary length of time. The dagger seemed different from the very beginning. Tutankhamun ruled Egypt during the 14th century BC, a time when iron was still incredibly rare throughout the ancient world. Most tools, most weapons, most everyday objects were made from bronze. Iron existed, but only in very small quantities. It was more valuable than many precious metals, a gift fit for a king. Owning an iron blade during this period was an unmistakable symbol of status, but it also raised an important question. Where had the metal come from? For decades, archaeologists debated the answer. Some believed Egyptian craftsmen had somehow mastered early ironworking much sooner than previously thought. Others suspected the metal had been imported from distant lands where experimental techniques were beginning to emerge. The dagger remained an unsolved puzzle, beautiful, ancient, silent, waiting. Everything changed nearly a century after the tomb was discovered. Modern scientists examined the blade using non-destructive X-ray fluorescence, allowing them to study its chemical composition without damaging the priceless artifact. The results were unexpected. The iron contained unusually high amounts of nickel and cobalt, far higher than normally found in iron produced from Earth's ores. Those chemical signatures closely matched something else: meteorites, fragments of iron that had fallen from space. The discovery transformed the way researchers understood the dagger. Rather than being forged from mined iron, it now appeared that ancient craftsmen had worked with metal that arrived on Earth long before human civilization even existed. Stone from the heavens, shaped by human hands, a remarkable meeting of two very different histories, one born among the stars, the other beside the Nile. Ancient Egyptian texts occasionally referred to iron as the metal of heaven. For many years, historians wondered whether the phrase was symbolic, perhaps poetic, perhaps religious. The dagger gave those ancient words a new perspective. If the blade truly came from a meteorite, then the description may have been surprisingly literal. The metal had in fact fallen from the sky. Perhaps the Egyptians knew exactly what they meant. The craftsmanship itself remains equally impressive. Meteoric iron is difficult to work. Its composition differs from ordinary iron. Heating it incorrectly can cause cracks or fractures, yet the blade was carefully shaped, smoothly polished, expertly fitted into an elegant golden handle decorated with crystal and delicate ornamentation. Whoever forged it possessed exceptional skill. Knowledge passed through experienced hands, now largely forgotten. Some researchers believe the dagger may have arrived in Egypt as a diplomatic gift from another kingdom, already familiar with working meteoritic iron. Letters discovered at Amarna mention iron objects exchanged between powerful rulers. Others think Egyptian craftsmen themselves created the blade after obtaining a rare meteorite. Both ideas remain possible. Neither has been proven completely. The dagger keeps part of its story. Another question lingers. Why place this particular weapon beside Tutankhamun? Perhaps it symbolized royal authority. Perhaps it served as protection during the king's journey into the afterlife. Or perhaps a blade forged from the heavens carried a sacred meaning beyond anything written in surviving texts. No inscription explains the decision. The tomb remains quiet. The dagger says nothing. Today, the weapon is considered one of the most remarkable objects ever discovered in ancient Egypt. Not because it rewrites history, but because it reveals something wonderfully human. Ancient people looked toward the night sky with the same curiosity we feel today. When a meteorite blazed across the darkness and landed upon the earth, they recognized its rarity, its beauty, its mystery. Unfinished Obelisk Aswan. Deep within an ancient granite quarry in southern Egypt lies a monument that was never meant to remain where it is today. A colossal block of stone abandoned in the very place where skilled craftsmen began shaping it more than 3,000 years ago. It never stood before a temple. It never greeted a pharaoh. It never reached the sky. Instead, it remained exactly where the builders left it, half carved, half attached, frozen in time. Today it is known as the Unfinished Obelisk of Aswan. One of the greatest engineering projects ancient Egypt never completed, and perhaps one of its most revealing. The story begins in the granite quarries of Aswan, where generations of Egyptian stoneworkers extracted the enormous blocks that became statues, temples, and obelisks across the kingdom. The landscape still bears their marks: ancient tool grooves, partially cut stones, channels carved into solid bedrock, everywhere traces of human effort. It was here, during the 20th century, that archaeologists began studying one enormous shape emerging directly from the living granite. Not a fallen monument, not a buried ruin, a monument still attached to the earth itself, as though time had simply stopped. The scale is astonishing. If completed, the obelisk would have measured more than 40 meters in length. Its weight is estimated at well over 1,000 tons, far larger than any obelisk ever successfully erected in ancient Egypt. It would have dwarfed many of the monuments standing in Karnak and Luxor today. A single piece of granite, nothing joined together, nothing assembled later, one stone, one extraordinary ambition. The builders first outlined its shape directly onto the bedrock before beginning the slow process of cutting away the surrounding granite using rounded dolerite hammerstones, striking the surface thousands upon thousands of times until the monument gradually emerged from the quarry floor. It was patient work, careful work, work measured in months, perhaps years. Every blow mattered. Then something went wrong. A long crack appeared along one side of the obelisk, not a small fracture, a serious flaw, large enough to threaten the entire monument. The damage changed everything. Ancient engineers understood that lifting a cracked obelisk weighing more than 1,000 tons would be extraordinarily dangerous. The risk was simply too great. The project was abandoned, without ceremony, without repair. The workers walked away. The stone remained. That decision may be the monument's greatest gift to archaeology. Had the obelisk been completed, it would have stood before a temple like so many others. Instead, it preserved something far rarer. Evidence of how Egyptian engineers actually worked. The quarry became a workshop frozen in time. Tool marks still surround the monument. Cutting trenches remain exactly where ancient workers left them. Even the unfinished surface tells a story, one interrupted by a single crack. Researchers have spent decades studying those marks. The evidence suggests that teams of workers used hard dolerite stones to pound away the granite little by little, creating long channels around the monument before eventually separating it from the bedrock beneath. The process demanded remarkable organisation, patience, skill, and an extraordinary understanding of stone. Even today, the achievement commands respect. Yet one question continues to spark debate. How did the Egyptians intend to move it? Some researchers believe enormous wooden sledges would have carried the finished obelisk across specially prepared roads before it was loaded onto barges floating on the Nile. Others suggest carefully constructed earthen ramps helped control every stage of the journey. A few believe several techniques worked together: ramps, ropes, sledges, hundreds of workers moving in perfect coordination. The exact method remains uncertain. No complete written description survives. Only the quarry, only the evidence. The monument also reminds us that ancient builders accepted failure. Not every project reached completion. Not every plan succeeded. The cracked obelisk was not hidden. It was not destroyed. It was simply left where it lay. An unfinished chapter, waiting beneath the Egyptian sun. Perhaps the builders hoped another generation might return. They never did. Standing beside the obelisk today is a remarkable experience. Its true size is almost impossible to appreciate in photographs. The granite stretches farther than expected. Its sides rise from the quarry floor like the hull of an enormous stone ship. Every hammer mark remains visible. Every unfinished edge preserves the work of hands that disappeared thousands of years ago. It feels less like a ruin, more like a conversation interrupted. Modern archaeologists continue studying the quarry using laser scanning, geological surveys, and careful measurements that reveal new details about ancient engineering. Each investigation answers another small question. Another mystery gives way, yet the largest questions remain. Could the obelisk really have been transported? Would it have become the tallest ever raised? Or was the project simply too ambitious from the beginning? The stone offers no opinion. Scoop marks of Aswan Quarry. Long before the pyramids reached toward the sky, before towering obelisks stood outside Egypt's greatest temples, every monument began in the same place, a quarry, a landscape of solid granite. Scattered across the bedrock are thousands of strange circular depressions, each one carefully carved into the stone, as though someone had pressed an enormous spoon into the surface. They appear everywhere, beside unfinished statues, around abandoned obelisks, across the quarry floor. At first glance they seem insignificant, just marks in the rock. Yet these unusual impressions have become one of the most fascinating clues to understanding how ancient Egypt's greatest monuments were actually built. Today they are simply known as the scoop marks of the Aswan Quarry. Small details, large questions. The granite quarries of Aswan supplied stone for some of Egypt's most famous monuments, including towering obelisks, colossal statues, temple columns, and enormous blocks transported hundreds of kilometres along the Nile to cities across the kingdom. For thousands of years this place echoed with the sound of stone. Hammerstones striking granite, workers calling to one another, dust filling the air. It was one of the busiest industrial landscapes of the ancient world. Today, only silence remains, and the stone remembers. Archaeologists have studied the quarries for more than a century. Every surface tells part of the story. Deep trenches, half-finished monuments, ancient pathways, and thousands upon thousands of rounded depressions scattered across the exposed granite. Some are only a few centimetres wide, others are much larger. Many overlap one another. Together they form long rows that follow the outlines of unfinished stone blocks. Nothing about their arrangement appears random. The marks were created by repeated hammering. Ancient workers used rounded stones made from dolerite an exceptionally hard volcanic rock capable of gradually wearing away the granite beneath. Each strike removed only a tiny amount of stone. One blow, then another, then another. Hours became days, days became months. Patience shaped the quarry, not speed. The scoop marks reveal something rarely preserved at archaeological sites: the process itself. Finished monuments often hide the work that created them. The quarry does the opposite. Here every mistake remains visible, every abandoned cut, every unfinished trench, every mark left by a worker whose name has long been forgotten. It is less a construction site than a frozen moment in history. One of the most remarkable examples surrounds the famous Unfinished Obelisk. Rows of scoop marks trace the monument's outline with astonishing precision, showing exactly how workers slowly separated the massive stone from the surrounding bedrock without using iron tools or modern machinery. The evidence is remarkably clear. Researchers can almost follow the builders step by step, strike after strike, channel after channel, the granite slowly giving way. Yet the scoop marks also raise important questions. How many workers were involved? How long did it take? Exactly how was such careful accuracy maintained across monuments weighing hundreds of tons? No ancient manual survives. No detailed construction records have been found. The quarry offers clues, not complete answers. Some archaeologists believe teams worked in carefully organised groups, each responsible for a specific section of stone, while experienced supervisors checked the monument's dimensions throughout the process. Such coordination would explain the remarkable consistency visible across the quarry. Others suggest smaller groups of highly skilled craftsmen carried out the most delicate work, leaving ordinary labourers to remove larger quantities of granite nearby. Both ideas remain possible. Neither can be proven completely. The stone stays silent. Another mystery concerns the tools themselves. Thousands of worn dolerite hammerstones have been discovered throughout Aswan, many showing clear signs of repeated use against granite. Their rounded shapes fit perfectly with the scoop marks left behind. For most Egyptologists, the connection is straightforward. The tools created the marks. The marks reveal the method. Yet researchers continue studying exactly how such simple tools produce such remarkably precise results on one of the hardest stones known to the ancient world. The answers grow clearer. The admiration grows deeper. Standing inside the quarry today feels very different from walking through an Egyptian temple. There are no towering columns, no painted ceilings, no carved kings celebrating victory, only bare granite stretching beneath the sun, covered with thousands of small depressions, each one the result of human effort, each one representing another moment of patient work. Together they form a record more honest than any inscription, a record of labour, skill, persistence. Core 7, Granite Drill, Petrie Museum. Among the thousands of artefacts displayed inside the Petrie Museum in London sits a small cylinder of granite that most visitors walk past without a second glance. Yet for more than 100 years, it has quietly become one of the most discussed pieces of ancient Egyptian stone ever discovered. It isn't made of gold, it isn't covered with hieroglyphs, it doesn't belong to a famous king. It fits comfortably in one hand. Yet this small fragment continues to raise surprisingly large questions. A cylinder of granite, deep spiral grooves, a mystery carved into stone. It is known simply as Core 7, and it has fascinated archaeologists, engineers, and historians ever since. The story begins during the late 19th century when British archaeologist Sir William Flinders Petrie carried out extensive excavations at Giza, documenting monuments with a level of precision that helped shape modern archaeology. Petrie paid attention to everything. Not only temples, not only statues, even broken fragments mattered. During his work, he recovered several cylindrical granite cores believed to have been left behind during ancient stone drilling. One specimen attracted particular attention, later catalogued as Core 7, small enough to overlook, important enough to remember. At first glance, the object seems ordinary. It is simply a cylinder of pink granite removed during the drilling of a larger stone block. But a closer look changes everything. Its surface carries clear spiral grooves wrapping around the cylinder from top to bottom. The lines are remarkably regular, remarkably consistent, almost like the threads of a screw. Those grooves became the centre of a debate that continues today. Granite is among the hardest stones the ancient Egyptians ever worked. Unlike softer limestone, it cannot simply be cut with ordinary copper tools. Instead, craftsmen relied on abrasion, sand, quartz, hard stone pounders, and enormous patience. By the Old Kingdom, Egyptian builders had already mastered remarkable techniques for shaping granite into statues, sarcophagi, temple columns, and obelisks. Core 7 appears to preserve part of that process, not the finished monument, the work behind it. Petrie carefully examined the spiral markings and offered an interpretation that sparked discussion for generations. He suggested the grooves indicated that the drill advanced into the granite more rapidly than many researchers expected from ancient drilling methods. His measurements became widely known. So did the questions they raised. Could simple copper tube drills really have produced these marks, or was something else happening? The artifact remained silent. The debate had only begun. Most Egyptologists today believe the drilling process relied on hollow copper tubes used together with abrasive sand, particularly quartz grains that gradually wore away the granite, while the metal itself served mainly as a framework rather than the cutting edge. The method is supported by experimental archaeology. Modern researchers have recreated similar techniques. They work, slowly, patiently, exactly as ancient craftsmanship often required. Others focus on the spiral grooves themselves. Some engineers argue the markings may reflect slight variations in pressure, movement, or the natural behavior of abrasive particles during drilling rather than indicating unusually advanced tools. Tiny differences, repeated thousands of times, leaving visible patterns behind. It is a subtle explanation, one supported by careful experimentation. A few independent researchers have proposed different interpretations. They suggest the grooves represent evidence of drilling techniques not yet fully understood. Perhaps a combination of materials, perhaps methods that have simply disappeared with time. These ideas continue to be discussed, although they have not gained broad acceptance within mainstream archaeology. The evidence remains incomplete. Core 7 keeps its own counsel. One remarkable aspect of the artifact is how ordinary it really is. It was never intended to be displayed, never placed inside a royal tomb, never admired as a masterpiece. It was simply waste material, a byproduct left behind after drilling into solid granite. Ironically, that ordinary fragment may preserve more practical information about ancient stoneworking than many finished monuments ever could. Sometimes the smallest discoveries tell the largest stories. Today, researchers continue studying ancient Egyptian stoneworking through experimental archaeology, microscopic analysis, and careful examination of quarry marks, unfinished monuments, and surviving tools. Each experiment improves our understanding. Each new measurement refines earlier ideas. Yet Core 7 still appears in discussions about ancient engineering, not because it overturns history, but because it invites closer attention, closer measurement, better. Elephantine Island granite altar. At the southern edge of ancient Egypt, where the Nile squeezes between islands of dark granite before continuing its long journey north, lies a place that has watched kingdoms rise, disappear, and return again. For thousands of years, priests walked these riverbanks, merchants crossed the water, soldiers guarded the frontier. And somewhere among the temples a remarkable block of granite quietly survived. Not enormous, not covered in gold, yet carved with such care that archaeologists still wonder exactly how it was used. A simple monument, a complicated story. Today it is known as the Elephantine Island granite altar, and like much of Elephantine itself, it continues to guard more questions than answers. The island of Elephantine sits opposite the modern city of Aswan, surrounded by the same granite outcrops that supplied stone for many of Egypt's greatest monuments. This was no ordinary settlement. It marked Egypt's southern frontier, a place where cultures met, where trade flourished, where caravans arrived from Nubia carrying gold, ivory, ebony, and exotic goods from farther south. For thousands of years, the island remained one of the most important places along the Nile. Its importance never truly faded, only changed. Modern excavations began during the 19th century and have continued ever since, revealing layer upon layer of history beneath the island's surface as archaeologists uncovered temples, houses, workshops, shrines, and monuments built across many different periods of Egyptian civilization. Each excavation revealed another chapter, another generation, another forgotten story. The deeper researchers looked, the older the island became. Among those discoveries was a carefully carved granite altar associated with the sacred precincts of the island's temples. Unlike the towering obelisks of Aswan or the colossal statues found elsewhere in Egypt, this monument appears almost restrained. Solid granite, smooth surfaces, simple proportions, made to endure, not to impress. Its quiet appearance hides its significance. Granite was never an easy material to work. It demanded time, patience, experience. The craftsmen who shaped this altar understood their stone completely. Every surface was carefully finished, every edge deliberately formed. The object was clearly important enough to justify enormous effort. That alone tells part of its story. Elephantine was especially sacred to Khnum, the ram-headed creator god whom ancient Egyptians believed shaped human beings upon a potter's wheel before giving them life through the waters of the Nile. His temple stood here for centuries. Priests served him daily. Offerings filled the sanctuary. The rhythm of worship followed the rhythm of the river itself. The granite altar almost certainly belonged within that sacred world, a place where ritual mattered more than spectacle. Yet one important question remains. Exactly how was it used? Some Egyptologists believe it served as an offering altar where priests presented food, incense, wine, flowers, and sacred oils during ceremonies honouring Khnum and other deities worshipped on the island. That interpretation fits well with similar monuments elsewhere in Egypt. Altars often stood at the heart of temple rituals, simple in appearance, essential in purpose. Others think the granite block may have supported a sacred object rather than offerings themselves. Perhaps a divine statue, perhaps a ceremonial shrine carried during festivals, perhaps another monument now lost to history. If so, the altar we see today represents only one surviving piece of a much larger religious setting. The missing pieces may never be found. A few researchers suggest the monument changed purpose over time. Elephantine remained occupied for thousands of years. Temples were rebuilt, walls expanded, shrines altered. An altar created for one ceremony may later have served another. Ancient cities rarely stood still. They evolved, stone by stone, generation after generation. The granite witnessed every change. It says nothing. One of the remarkable qualities of Elephantine is its continuity. Unlike places abandoned after only a few centuries, this island remained important throughout much of Egyptian history. Old buildings became foundations for newer ones. Sacred spaces were renewed instead of forgotten. Each civilization left its own layer behind. The granite altar belongs to that long conversation between past and present, one voice among many, still waiting. Today, archaeologists continue excavating Elephantine using modern surveying techniques, careful conservation, and detailed mapping that reveal new structures almost every season. Saqqara stone vase step pyramid. Long before the Great Pyramid rose above the sands of Giza, another monument changed the course of Egyptian history forever, introducing a new age of stone architecture that would inspire every pyramid built after it. Beneath that monument, hidden inside deep underground galleries, archaeologists uncovered thousands of remarkable objects, not statues, not jewels, not weapons, stone vessels, hundreds upon hundreds of them, carved from some of the hardest stones found in Egypt: granite, diorite, basalt, quartzite, each shaped with extraordinary care, each raising the same quiet question: how did ancient craftsmen create them more than 4,000 years ago? The story begins beneath the step pyramid of King Djoser at Saqqara, the oldest pyramid ever built in Egypt and one of the greatest engineering achievements of the ancient world. Above the ground stands the pyramid itself, massive, elegant, timeless. Below the surface lies another world entirely, a maze of tunnels stretching for several kilometres beneath the desert, dark passageways, hidden chambers, long-forgotten rooms, a city beneath the sand. During excavations, archaeologists entered these underground galleries and found an astonishing collection of stone vessels, unlike anything previously discovered in such numbers. There were thousands of them, some complete, others broken, many stacked together inside sealed chambers. The collection represented one of the largest groups of ancient stone vessels ever found. It immediately captured the attention of researchers, not because of their decoration, but because of their craftsmanship. Many of the vessels were carved from limestone, others from alabaster, but some were made from materials far more difficult to shape: hard black basalt, dense granite, beautiful diorite, stones that challenge even modern craftsmen. Yet the ancient surfaces appear remarkably smooth, the walls surprisingly thin, the symmetry almost perfect. Each vessel feels carefully balanced, almost effortless, though nothing about making them would have been easy. Most Egyptologists believe many of these vessels date to Egypt's first and second dynasties, long before Djoser built the step pyramid itself. Rather than creating them himself, Djoser appears to have collected treasured objects from earlier royal burials and placed them within his own funerary complex. It was a way of honouring Egypt's earliest kings, a connection between dynasties, a bridge across generations. The vessels had already become ancient, even in ancient Egypt. One mystery continues to fascinate archaeologists. How exactly were these hard stone vessels manufactured? Researchers believe Egyptian craftsmen relied on copper tools combined with abrasive materials such as quartz sand to slowly grind, drill and polish the stone over many weeks or even months. The process demanded remarkable patience, remarkable precision, remarkable experience. Experimental archaeologists have successfully recreated many of these techniques. The work is slow, extremely slow, but possible. Others focus on the consistency of the finished vessels. Many display beautifully rounded interiors reached through surprisingly narrow openings, leaving researchers to study how ancient craftsmen controlled their tools inside spaces barely large enough for a human hand. The challenge is obvious. The answer's less so. Some believe specialized tubular drills played an important role. Others point toward carefully shaped abrasives attached to wooden shafts. Several techniques may have worked together. No single explanation answers every question. Another puzzle concerns the sheer number of vessels discovered beneath the pyramid. Why bury thousands of carefully crafted objects where no one would ever see them again? Some Egyptologists believe they formed part of Djoser's royal funerary equipment, ensuring the king possessed everything necessary for eternity. Others think they carried symbolic importance, connecting Djoser with Egypt's earliest rulers and reinforcing his legitimacy as pharaoh. Both ideas fit the available evidence. Neither explains every detail. The galleries remain quiet. Walking through the underground passages today is a very different experience from standing beside the step pyramid above. The sunlight disappears, the temperature falls, stone corridors stretch into darkness. Every chamber hints at another discovery, another forgotten object, another unanswered question. It is easy to understand why the galleries continue to capture the imagination. Giza Pyramid's Orion's belt alignment. For more than 4,000 years, the pyramids of Giza have stood beneath the same night sky, watching the stars rise above the desert, just as they did when the first limestone blocks were carefully placed upon the plateau. By day, they dominate the horizon. By night, something else takes over. The stars. 3 bright points of light, one slightly offset from the others, a pattern that has inspired generations of observers. Some believe the arrangement is more than coincidence. Others think it is simply chance. The debate has never truly disappeared. It is known today as the Orion's belt alignment, one of the most enduring questions surrounding the pyramids of Giza. The Giza Plateau has fascinated travellers for thousands of years, not only because of the immense size of its monuments, but because everything about the site appears carefully planned, from the placement of the pyramids to the orientation of temples, causeways and surrounding tombs. Nothing seems accidental. Every structure occupies its place. Every line appears deliberate. It feels ordered, purposeful, almost mathematical. The 3 great pyramids were built during Egypt's 4th dynasty, around 4,500 years ago, for the pharaohs Khufu, Khafra and Menkaure. Together they formed the centre of an enormous royal cemetery. Temples stood beside them. Boat pits surrounded them. Smaller pyramids and noble tombs stretched across the plateau. The complex represented far more than 3 monuments. It was a carefully designed sacred landscape, built for eternity. The mystery surrounding Orion's belt became widely known during the 20th century, when researchers noticed that the relative positions of the 3 pyramids appeared broadly similar to the three bright stars forming Orion's belt. Two pyramids stand almost perfectly aligned. The third sits slightly offset. The stars display a similar pattern. At first glance, the resemblance is striking, difficult to ignore, easy to remember. For some researchers, that similarity carries symbolic meaning. Ancient Egyptian religion closely associated the constellation Orion with Osiris, the god of rebirth and the afterlife. The connection appears repeatedly in religious texts. Kings hoped to join the gods among the stars after death. The heavens were not distant. They were part of eternity itself. Perhaps the pyramids reflected that belief. Perhaps their builders intentionally echoed the sky. Supporters of the idea also point toward the Nile. From certain perspectives, the river lies east of the pyramids, much as the Milky Way appears beside Orion in the night sky. To them, the entire landscape becomes symbolic. Earth reflecting heaven, stone reflecting stars, life reflecting eternity. It is an elegant idea, one that continues to capture imaginations around the world. Yet many Egyptologists remain cautious. They agree that astronomy played an important role in ancient Egyptian civilization. Temples were carefully aligned. The cardinal directions mattered enormously. Stars helped determine time, ritual, and orientation. But whether the pyramid layout intentionally mirrors Orion's belt remains uncertain. The similarities may not be precise enough. Measurements differ, angles vary. The correspondence is suggestive, not exact. Others argue the positions of the pyramids can be explained more simply. The builders worked with the shape of the plateau itself, bedrock quality, construction logistics, existing sacred spaces. Practical engineering may have influenced the final arrangement just as much as symbolism. Perhaps several considerations work together: religion, geography, architecture. The evidence does not point toward only one answer. One fact remains beyond dispute. The pyramids were carefully aligned with astonishing accuracy to the cardinal directions. Modern surveys show that the sides of the Great Pyramid differ from true north by only a tiny fraction of a degree. Such precision continues to impress engineers today. Exactly how Egyptian surveyors achieved it remains an active area of research. Some believe they observed circumpolar stars. Others suggest careful solar observations. Several techniques may have been combined. The builders left no detailed instructions, only the result. Standing on the Giza plateau after sunset, it is easy to understand why the Orion theory continues to endure. The desert grows quiet. The air cools. One by one, the stars begin to appear above the ancient stone. The same stars, the same horizon, the same monuments, separated by 45 centuries, yet still sharing the same sky. The connection feels natural, whether intentional or not. Modern archaeology approaches the question with careful restraint. Researchers continue studying ancient Egyptian astronomy, religious texts, and architectural planning. Each new discovery adds another piece to the puzzle. Some strengthen symbolic interpretations, others support more practical explanations. Neither side claims complete certainty. The pyramids continue to invite